You can listen to any episode of Football for Kids without the adverts by listening on Patreon or via Apple Podcast subscription. The Football Time Machine has officially sold out. Every last one of them is on their way to a home as we speak. But don't worry, there is one final chance to get something truly special for a listener this Christmas. I've opened up 10 spaces for custom episodes. In each one, I'll create a Football for Kids episode all about them, their journey, their triumphs, their setbacks, their funny moments, the sparks that make them who they are. The same magic and storytelling which I use for the icons we cover on the show, but in this case, it'll be all about them, the listener. If you'd like one, you'll find the PayPal link in the episode description. UK and Ireland orders will arrive in a beautiful frame. All other countries will receive a digital edition. Welcome to the Football for Kids podcast with me, Darren Rees, and welcome to yet another brand new episode. In this episode, we're going to be talking for the second time about Phil Foden. Now, Phil Foden was one of the first episodes I ever did on Football for Kids, and the first episode I made on him came out in December 2022. So, what we're going to do in this episode is explore the journey from January 2023 all the way to the present day. Now, before we get into this episode on Phil Foden and his incredible journey since that time, we need to do a couple of very quick shout-outs. And the first one goes to Oscar, who is a player for Ashford Rovers in Wicklow in Ireland. He practices every day and he loves Cristiano Ronaldo and Kylian Mbappe and R9 Ronaldo, and he is a Manchester United fan. So Oscar, a massive shout out to you. Thank you for getting in contact. Thank you for your episode requests, and I hope that you really enjoy this episode on the legend that is Phil Foden. And lastly, a massive birthday shout out goes to Alexander, who is going to be 9 on the 14th of December. So, if your name is Alexander and you're going to be 9 on the 14th of December, this is a huge birthday shout out to you. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I really, really hope that you love this episode on the brilliant Phil Foden. So, talking of Phil Foden, let's get on with it, shall we? And let's begin in January 2023. At the very start of 2023, Phil Foden found himself at a bit of a crossroads. He'd just come back from the 2022 FIFA World Cup in Qatar, where England's adventure ended in the quarter-finals. And like many of the best players in the world, he felt a strange mix of tired legs and some tired emotions. Phil had a bit of a tricky spell. His rhythm fell off, little injuries kept popping up like annoying little gremlins, and in a team as fierce and as fantastic as Pep Guardiola's Manchester City, even a superstar like Phil Foden had to fight hard to win back his place in the starting lineup. It was a bump in the road, but there will always be bumps in the road. It doesn't matter if you're Darren Rees or Phil Foden or whatever your name is. In life, you will always experience bumps in the road. But what we do know is those bumps in the road, they most certainly make us stronger. The first few months of 2023 felt like a giant test of patience for young Phil Foden. In January and in February, he kept slipping in and out of the Manchester City starting team. It was almost like a game of musical chairs. Poor old Phil had a sore foot, which he had hurt during a Manchester derby in January. It would just not settle. Every time he tried to burst away at full speed, it felt like someone had pressed pause on a remote which said Phil Foden. It was one of those types of injuries. At the same time, Manchester City were chasing Arsenal in the Premier League title race. and the pressure around the squad, well, it felt huge. Phil was used to zooming past defenders like a rocket. It was like he had a NOS button, so being unable to sprint without pain was incredibly frustrating. But instead of sulking, he used the time wisely. From the sidelines, he watched the games in a new way. He was learning, thinking, and resetting his mind. Phil quietly worked with the medical team and the coaches, fixing his body and sharpening his focus, ready for the months ahead. It was not a story of slipping backwards, it was a story of getting tighter and getting ready to explode onto the scene once again. Now, of course, Phil Foden would undoubtedly make a big comeback, and that big moment arrived on the 4th of March 2023, and wow, did he make it count. Manchester City were playing Newcastle United, a team famous at that time for having one of the strongest defences in the whole of the Premier League. The match was tight, it was tense, it was full of nerves. Then, in the 15th minute, Phil decided it was time to remind everyone exactly who he was. He picked up the ball in the right side and set off on one of those magical, very Phil Foden runs. A little shimmy at the shoulder, a quick burst of speed. Suddenly, he was dancing past defenders, and then another one, and then another one, and, well, you guessed it, another one. He fired a shot that took a tiny deflection and flew past Nick Pope, the Newcastle United keeper. The Etihad roared. It was classic Phil Foden. Brave, cheeky, and simply brilliant. And that moment was not just exciting, let's get it straight. It was historic. That game made Phil Foden one of the youngest players in Manchester City's entire history to reach 50 Premier League goal involvements. If you're wondering what on earth are you talking about, Darren, that means goals and assists added together. It proved he was not just fun to watch, he was properly productive. This performance lit the spark. It told the manager Pep Guardiola, his teammates and the whole stadium that Phil Foden was back. Not only was he back, he was sharp, he was confident, and he was ready to help push Manchester City towards more trophies. Winter worries were gone, and Spring Foden, well, he had arrived. Just when Phil Foden's season was bursting back into life, something completely unexpected happened. Well, I guess this is just a story of life and football all put together. This time, it had nothing to do with football though. After the brilliant win against Newcastle United and the run of strong games which he had, Phil joined up with the England team for an international break. But only a few hours before England were due to play Ukraine at Wembley, the national stadium, Phil told the staff that he felt really poorly. Doctors checked him and discovered something wasn't quite right. In fact, they said that something was pretty serious. Phil had something called acute appendicitis. This meant his appendix was swollen and dangerous. He needed surgery and he needed it as soon as possible. So he was taken out of the England squad and rushed for an operation on the 26th of March in 2023. The surgeons had to remove his appendix. But for most people, recovery takes 2 or 3 weeks. But for a Premier League footballer who has to sprint and twist and jump and take tackles, it usually means at least 5 or 6 weeks out. And worst of all, it meant that Phil had to miss Manchester City's huge match against Liverpool. It was a blow for Phil and, of course, for the club and the manager too. Losing a player like him in the middle of a title race felt like a proper nightmare. But Phil Foden is made of strong stuff. I mean, of course he is. He's from Manchester, which is probably one of my most favourite places on earth. He worked hard through every step of his rehab, building back his strength bit by bit, and by late April he was back on the training pitch, sharp again and ready just in time for some of the most important matches Manchester City had ever faced in the history of the club. However, I've got to tell you, the end of the 2022-23 season became a stuff of legend for Phil Foden. This was the moment when he helped Manchester City achieve something almost no other English team in football history had ever done before, apart from their rivals, Manchester United. They won the Premier League, they won the FA Cup, and of course, they won the Champions League. all in the same season. And if you didn't know and you've been living underneath a rock, that's called the treble, when you win all three of those things. First came the Premier League title in May 2023 on the 20th of May. Manchester City were officially crowned the champions after Arsenal lost to Nottingham Forest. The next day, City played Chelsea, and Phil started the match in front of a buzzing, celebrating crowd. When he lifted that trophy, it was already his 5th Premier League medal, and he was only 22 years old. Most people at 22 years old don't know if they should go for a normal plate or a king-size plate at Toby Carvery. Phil Foden had his 5th Premier League medal. Then came the FA Cup final on the 3rd of June 2023. For the first time ever, it was Manchester City versus Manchester United at Wembley in an FA Cup final. Yes, they'd met in previous years of the 150-something years of a tournament, but they'd never actually met in a final before. I know that is crazy, but trust me, it's true. It was a huge derby on the biggest stage. Phil did not start, but when he did come on in the 76th minute, with City winning 2-1, the game was still on a knife edge. United were attacking like crazy, searching for an equaliser, looking for a goal in Fergie time. Phil helped calm everything down by carrying the ball forward and keeping it safe, easing the pressure on City's defence. Those smart touches helped secure the second piece of the treble for Manchester City, and Phil Foden absolutely played a major part in all of it. Finally came the Champions League final on the 10th of June in 2023 in Istanbul against Inter Milan. It was the ultimate match of the season. It was tense and my goodness was it tactical. But in the 36th minute, disaster struck. Kevin De Bruyne was injured. He'd injured his hamstring and he had to come off. However, Pep Guardiola had a secret trick up his sleeve. He turned to Phil Foden. Imagine that, being sent on in the biggest club football match in the world. But Phil did not look scared, not even for a second. He stepped into the central attacking midfielder role and played with confidence. In the second half, after Rodri had put City 1-0 up, Phil produced a breathtaking moment. He spun past his marker with a perfect half turn. He burst into the penalty area and found himself face to face with the Inter goalkeeper. His shot was saved, but the run was one of the highlights of the entire final because, well, that's just what Phil Foden did. When the whistle blew, Phil Foden had done it. He and Manchester City were Champions League winners, treble winners. While Manchester City were celebrating the treble with confetti flying and champagne fizzing, a brand new star quietly stole the spotlight, and this brand new star had everything to do with Phil Foden. So don't you think that I'm going off on a tangent. And that brand new star went by the name of 4-year-old Ronnie Foden. No, that's not his full name. He is 4 years old and his name's Ronnie Foden. Anyway, as the players celebrated in Istanbul and later in Manchester, little Ronnie ran around like, well, he owned the place in the most wonderful of ways. He giggled with the squad, he perched on shoulders and marched around with Erling Haaland and Kyle Walker like they were his personal bodyguards. Fans all over the world watched the videos and they fell in love with this cheeky chap who was the son of the great Phil Foden. And then something amazing happened. In South America and Mexico, fans started calling him El Güey. It is a friendly Spanish slang that means the dude. And soon he became Manchester City's unofficial mascot. His fame absolutely exploded. Phil Foden helped him start an Instagram account. Well, I mean, you'd hope he did, because if he was 4 years old and he was starting an Instagram account, there's some stuff to worry about. Anyway, within just 14 hours, Ronnie had 1 million followers. By 2024, he had more than 4 million followers. That's more than most Premier League players. Anyway, back to Phil Foden and that treble winning season. Well, if Phil Foden played a big part in that treble season, well, it's fair to say that the 23-24 season would show him being a major cog in the engine of Manchester City forever. This was the year he stopped being the brilliant young talent, and people love to describe Phil Foden as young, but he became the player that everyone talked about, the player of the year. It all began on the very first day of the season against Burnley. Manchester City lost Kevin De Bruyne to another hamstring injury. Poor old Kevin. Anyway, suddenly the big question was asked: who could replace such a great player in such a position? Look no further. There he was, Phil Foden, the man from the Manchester City Academy, the man who had lit up the Etihad so many times, the man who could be trusted. Pep Guardiola moved him into the middle, into the clever, tricky number 10 role, and this is where Phil, quite frankly, exploded. Tight spaces became playgrounds. Defenders became cones to zip posts. His energy, dribbling and shooting became City's main weapon. And this was the season when the world met the sniper. After scoring, Phil would drop to one knee, look through an imaginary scope and pretend to fire. Phil was remarkable that season, and on the final day of the season, which arrived on the 19th of May 2024, Manchester City needed one more win to make football history with a fourth title in a row. The stadium crackled with nerves. Then Phil Foden calmed the entire world in just 79 seconds. He took the ball, spun and smashed a rocket into the top corner before some fans had even taken their seats. Minutes later, well, he scored again. Manchester City went on to win that game 3-1. The title was theirs, and Phil Foden had once again delivered like the superstar that he is. The 2024-25 season turned into a true rollercoaster for Phil Foden. It had highs, of course it did, and it had lows because, well, that's life. Twists and turns showed just how strong and determined he really was though. And after an exhausting end to 2023-24 and the emotional challenge of the Euro 2024 tournament, the new campaign did not begin, well, let's say smoothly. It was back in August and September of that period that Foden missed several matches. He battled recurring illnesses and heavy fatigue. Pep Guardiola said that he needed a rest, he needed a reset, and Phil bravely chose to step away from the England squad for the September international so he could focus on his health. It was a wise and mature decision, proving to young players and his teammates everywhere that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is rest and listen to your body, because you'll never get back to 100% if you just keep battling it. And on the 1st of October 2024, away to Slovan Bratislava, Phil scored his first goal of the season with a sharp turn and a finish before assisting in another in a 4-0 Champions League win. 3 weeks later, in a game in Prague, he struck early in a 5-0 victory. These goals placed him in elite company. Phil Foden became only the 4th player in history to score in 7 consecutive Champions League seasons. The momentum continued in early 2025 with one of the wildest matches of the year. Manchester City beat Fulham 5-4 in a chaotic thriller. 9 goals. Yes, you calculated that right. Phil scored twice, dragging City forward whenever the match began to slip away. His energy was a difference between panic and triumph, between losing and winning. But football, as you know, is unpredictable. In May 2025, City reached the FA Cup final, where they would meet Crystal Palace in a huge upset. Palace would win 1-0. It stung deeply. It was a reminder that even the strongest teams can fall, and that respect for every opponent is always essential. Then came the summer of 2025, and the expanded FIFA Club World Cup in the USA. In a dramatic 4-3 match against Al Hilal, Phil scored his 100th goal for Manchester City. He became just the 20th player in the club's history to reach that magical milestone, doing so as a midfielder at only 25 years old. It was simply an incredible achievement. More history would follow on the 2nd of November 2025 in a 3-1 win over Bournemouth. Phil made his 200th Premier League appearance at 25 years and 158 days old. He became the youngest Manchester City player ever to reach that number. A record built on trust, talent and years of relentless hard work. Because trust me, if you put the work in, at some point, eventually, you will get the results out. And Phil is living proof of it. Phil Foden's journey so far is a story of electricity, of courage and of heart. He has faced injuries, pressure, and my goodness has he faced heartbreak. He's also created unforgettable moments. He's lifted trophies and, of course, he's broken many records. He is an example to you young listeners listening everywhere, all over the world, that being great isn't about being perfect. It's about rising every single time life tries to slow you down. So, to every single one of you listening, remember this: your future is wide open. Run into it with bravery. Learn from the tough days. Celebrate the good ones. And when your big moments arrive, and they will do if you put the work in, be ready to fire your own shots, just like Phil Foden. So remember, if you know someone who loves football just as much as you do, then please tell them about the Football for Kids podcast. And whether you're playing football soon, watching it on the telly, or pitchside, I hope that you enjoy the game. See you next time. Oh, and remember, if you want to get a custom episode for a lucky listener, then you can do so via the link in the episode description.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
AI agents are everywhere, automating tasks and making decisions at machine speed. But agents make mistakes. Just one rogue agent can do big damage before you even notice. Rubrik Agent Cloud is the only platform that helps you monitor agents, set guardrails, and rewind mistakes, so you can unleash agents, not risk. Accelerate your AI transformation at Rubrik.com. That's RUBRIK.com.